Little girl stops her millionaire dad's wedding and reveals shocking truth about the bride. Dad calls 911 immediately. Before we jump in, this story reached people in over 50 countries last week. Let's see how far it goes today. The afternoon. Sun cast long shadows through the tall windows of the Bennett mansion, illuminating particles of dust that danced in the golden light. Sophie Bennett sat cross-legged on her bed, her small fingers carefully arranging a collection of seashells. She and her mother had gathered years ago at Cape Cod. At 8 years old, Sophie possessed a keen sense of observation that sometimes made her father joke she'd make an excellent detective someday. "Sophie, sweetheart, could you come downstairs? I have something important to tell you." Sophie recognized the unusual excitement in her father's voice. Nathan Bennett wasn't typically one for surprises or announcements. Since losing her mother 2 years ago, their life had fallen into a predictable, if somewhat hollow, routine. She carefully placed her mother's favorite pink conch shell back in its special spot before hopping off her bed. As she descended the grand staircase, Sophie noticed her father pacing in the living room below. Nathan Bennett was a striking figure, tall and confident, the very image of success in his tailored casual clothes. His technology company had made him one of Boston's most eligible bachelors, a fact that seemed to amuse rather than impress him. "There's my girl," Nathan said, his smile brighter than Sophie had seen in months. Something was different about him today, a lightness that had been absent since the funeral. "Is everything okay, Dad?" Sophie asked, her perceptive eyes scanning her father's face. Nathan guided her to sit beside him on the plush sofa. "Everything is wonderful, actually. I have some news that I think will make us both very happy." He took a deep breath. "You know Victoria, the woman I've been seeing these past few months?" Sophie nodded slowly. She had met Victoria Hayes several times, a dazzlingly beautiful woman with perfect clothes and a smile that somehow never quite reached her eyes. "Well," Nathan continued, practically bouncing with excitement, "I've asked Victoria to marry me and she said yes. She's going to become part of our family. Isn't that wonderful?" The words hit Sophie like a sudden winter chill. She felt her body tense involuntarily as conflicting emotions raced through her mind. Her father was watching her expectantly, his eyes bright with hope. "You're getting married?" Sophie managed to ask, her voice smaller than intended. "Yes, in just 3 months. I know it seems fast, but when you know, you know." Nathan squeezed her hand. "Victoria is so excited to become your stepmother. She already has ideas for redecorating the guest room for when her sister visits, and she thinks you two could take cooking classes together. Wouldn't that be fun?" Sophie forced her lips into what she hoped resembled a smile. Something deep inside her, an intuition she couldn't explain, was setting off silent alarms. But her father looked so happy, happier than he'd been since before Mom got sick. "Are you?" "Sure, Dad. You've only known her for 6 months. Nathan's smile faltered slightly. "When you're older, you'll understand. Sometimes love happens quickly. Victoria brings light back into our home, Sophie. Don't you want that for us?" The weight of his happiness was heavy on her small shoulders. Sophie looked around the living room, at the photos of her mother still displayed prominently, at the piano that had fallen silent at her father's hopeful face. "I want you to be happy, Dad," she finally said, the words catching slightly in her throat. Nathan pulled her into a tight hug, completely missing the apprehension in his daughter's eyes. "We're going to be a family again, Sophie. Everything is going to be perfect now." As her father launched into details about the upcoming wedding, Sophie felt an unexplainable knot forming in her stomach. Why couldn't she be happy about this? Why did Victoria's perfectly practiced smile keep appearing in her mind like a warning? Something wasn't right. But how could she possibly explain that to her father when he was practically glowing with joy? Little did either of them know that this announcement would set into motion events that would test their bond in ways they could never imagine. The Bennett mansion buzzed with activity as staff arranged flowers and appetizers for the formal family gathering. Sophie watched from the grand staircase as Victoria orchestrated every detail, her voice honey-sweet with the caterers, but clipped when speaking to the housekeeper. "Sophie, there you are." Nathan waved her down. "Victoria brought something special for you." Victoria turned, her smile transforming her face as though someone had flipped a switch. She was undeniably beautiful, tall and elegant with chestnut hair cascading over her shoulders. Today she wore a powder blue dress that complemented her eyes perfectly. "Sophie, darling," Victoria approached, holding a small velvet box. "I thought we could start our relationship with something meaningful." She opened it to reveal a delicate, silver bracelet. "May I?" Sophie hesitantly extended her wrist, catching the pleased expression on her father's face. The bracelet felt cold against her skin. "It's beautiful," Sophie said carefully. "Thank you." "We're going to be such good friends," Victoria said, tucking a strand of hair behind Sophie's ear with perfectly manicured fingers. "Your father tells me you're quite the little artist. Perhaps we could redecorate your room together, make it more suitable for a growing girl." Before Sophie could respond, the doorbell rang. Nathan went to greet the first guests while Victoria bent down to Sophie's level. "This is an important day for your father and me," she whispered, her breath smelling of mint and something metallic. "I'm counting on you to help make a good impression." For a fleeting moment, her eyes hardened before warming again as she straightened to welcome the arriving family members. Aunt Olivia was the last to arrive. Sophie's favorite relative embraced her tightly before greeting Nathan with a critical eyebrow. "6 months, Nathan? Really?" Olivia murmured, though Sophie overheard. "Don't start," Nathan replied quietly. "She makes me happy. That's all that matters." The afternoon unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Victoria charmed everyone with stories of her charity work and international travels. She seemed to know exactly what each person wanted to hear, complimenting Uncle Robert's new business venture, discussing gardening with grandmother Eloise, and sharing college memories with Nathan's cousins. Only Aunt Olivia remained reserved, her sharp eyes missing nothing. During dessert, she found Sophie alone in the kitchen. "How are you feeling about all this, sweetheart?" Olivia asked, helping herself to another strawberry tart. Sophie traced patterns in the condensation of her water glass. "Dad's happy." "That's not what I asked." Olivia studied her niece carefully. "Victoria certainly knows how to work a room." "She's different when Dad's not around," Sophie whispered, then immediately regretted her words. Olivia's expression sharpened. "Different how?" Before Sophie could answer, Victoria appeared in the doorway. "There you are. Nathan's looking for you both. He wants to toast the 3 most important women in his life." Her smile remained fixed as her eyes darted between them. As they returned to the gathering, Victoria's hand rested on Sophie's shoulder, her grip just tight enough to be uncomfortable. Sophie glanced back at Aunt Olivia, whose watchful gaze followed Victoria with newfound intensity. While the adults clinked champagne glasses, Sophie sipped her sparkling cider and observed. Something about Victoria reminded her of the beautiful but poisonous flowers in her science book, alluring on the surface but dangerous to touch. "Sophie, I need to speak with you." Victoria's voice drifted up the staircase 3 days after the family gathering. Sophie reluctantly set aside her book and made her way downstairs. Her father had left for an overnight business trip that morning, the first time she would be alone with Victoria for an extended period. Victoria stood in the living room, tablet in hand, her casual elegance a stark contrast to the rigid posture she now adopted. Gone was the warm smile Sophie had witnessed at the family gathering. "Your father mentioned you have a piano recital next week," Victoria said, not looking up from her screen. "We'll need to reschedule it." Sophie froze on the bottom step. "But I've been practicing for months. Dad already took the day off." Victoria's eyes flicked up, cold and impatient. "I've arranged an important dinner with potential investors for your father's company. Family priorities need to adjust when business opportunities arise." "But Dad promised—" "Let me make something clear," Victoria cut her off, setting down the tablet. "Your father is a successful man who wasted 2 years grief-stricken over your mother. I'm helping him reclaim his position in society." She approached Sophie, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. Your little recitals and school events are charming, but they're not the priority anymore. The transformation was complete. The warm, attentive woman who had captivated Nathan had vanished entirely. In her place stood someone calculating and cold, studying Sophie like an inconvenient variable in an equation. I don't think Dad would agree, Sophie said quietly, surprising herself with her boldness. Victoria laughed, the sound sharp and without humor. Your father sees what I want him to see. Men like Nathan are predictable, especially widowers so desperate for companionship. She circled the room, trailing her fingers over photo frames. She stopped at one featuring Sophie's mother, picking it up with a look of distaste. We'll be replacing these outdated decorations after the wedding, she stated, including these photos. They're morbid reminders of the past. Those are my mom, Sophie protested, rushing forward. Victoria set the frame down with deliberate care. Your mother is gone, Sophie. The sooner you accept that, the easier this transition will be. Her tone softened artificially. I'm not trying to replace her. I'm simply creating a new chapter for all of us. Later that evening, when Sophie's bedroom door creaked open, she pretended to be asleep. Victoria entered quietly, surveying the room with clinical detachment. So much wasted space, Victoria murmured, opening Sophie's closet and examining her possessions. This could easily be converted into a proper guest suite after the wedding. When the door finally closed, Sophie buried her face in her pillow to muffle her sobs. The next morning, she tried telling her father about Victoria's behavior during their video call. Dad, Victoria said we need to cancel my recital and she wants to take down all the pictures of Mom. Nathan's forehead creased momentarily before his expression softened. Sweetheart, I'm sure there's a misunderstanding. Victoria mentioned a scheduling conflict, but we'll work it out. And nobody's removing your mother's photos. Victoria just suggested updating some of the older frames. But Dad, change is hard, Sophie. But Victoria is trying her best to blend our lives together. Give her a chance, okay? After they hung up, Sophie sat on her window seat, clutching her mother's photograph. For the first time, she recognized a terrible truth. Her father couldn't or wouldn't see the real Victoria Hayes. She was completely alone in her suspicions. Rain pelted against the classroom windows as Sophie stared at the untouched math worksheet on her desk. 2 weeks had passed since her father's business trip, and Victoria's presence in their home had grown increasingly dominant. Family photos had mysteriously been accidentally damaged during cleaning, and Sophie's piano recital had indeed been rescheduled to a time when her father was unavailable to attend. Sophie? The bell rang 5 minutes ago, Mrs. Reynolds said, gently, approaching her desk. Is everything all right? Startled, Sophie quickly gathered her belongings. Sorry, Mrs. Reynolds, I was just thinking. Her teacher studied her with concerned eyes. You've seemed distracted lately. My door is always open if you need to talk. Sophie nodded gratefully before hurrying out. The school bus had already departed, but Sophie didn't mind the wait. Victoria was picking her up today, which meant at least 30 minutes of peaceful solitude before she arrived. Sheltering under the school's entrance canopy, Sophie noticed a sleek black car parked across the street. Through the rain-streaked window, she glimpsed a familiar silhouette. Victoria's distinctive profile, unmistakable even at a distance. But Victoria wasn't alone. A man Sophie had never seen before sat in the driver's seat, leaning close to Victoria, their conversation appearing intense. Sophie's heart raced as she instinctively stepped back into the shadows of the doorway. Victoria laughed at something the man said, then, to Sophie's shock, leaned forward and kissed him deeply. Fumbling for her phone, Sophie managed to snap a blurry photo just as Victoria exited the car. The man stayed inside, his features unclear, through the rain-spattered windshield. 15 minutes later, Victoria's red convertible pulled up to the school entrance, and she emerged with a perfectly rehearsed look of concern. Sophie, darling, I'm so sorry I'm late. Traffic was absolutely dreadful with this weather. Sophie clutched her backpack tightly. That's okay. I was talking to Mrs. Reynolds about a project. During the drive home, Victoria chatted about wedding, preparations, and an upcoming charity gala. Sophie stared out the window, her mind racing. When they passed the spot where the black car had been parked, it was gone. "Dad's coming home tonight, right?" Sophie asked, interrupting Victoria's monologue. "About flower arrangements, yes, but quite late. We'll have dinner together, just us girls." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Wouldn't that be lovely?" After they arrived home, Sophie retreated to her room. Pretending to do homework, she waited until she heard Victoria on the phone in the master bedroom before slipping downstairs, to the study. Her father's computer was password protected, but Sophie knew it by heart: her mother's birthday. With trembling fingers, she searched for Victoria Hayes online, scrolling through social media profiles and news mentions about charity events. Nothing seemed suspicious until she found an article about a tech industry gala from 3 years ago. In a background photo, partially cropped but unmistakable, stood Victoria alongside the man from the black car. Sophie quickly took a screenshot and sent it to her own email before clearing the browser history. That evening at dinner, Sophie carefully observed Victoria, noting how she checked her phone repeatedly when she thought Sophie wasn't looking. "Is everything okay?" Sophie asked innocently. "You seem worried about something." Victoria's expression flickered briefly before settling into a practiced smile. "Just wedding jitters, I suppose. Planning the perfect day is quite stressful. Who was that man you were talking to today? Before you picked me up?" Victoria's fork clattered against her plate. "What man?" Her voice remained steady, but her knuckles whitened around her water glass. "I saw you talking to someone in a black car across from school." Victoria's laugh sounded hollow. "Oh, that must have been Tyler, the wedding planner. We had a last-minute crisis with the catering. Nothing for you to worry about." But Sophie had caught the momentary panic in Victoria's eyes, and it confirmed what she already suspected. Victoria Hayes was hiding something big enough to make her nervous. That night, Sophie added the name Tyler to a new document. On her tablet titled Operation Truth, her investigation had officially begun. 3 more sightings of Tyler and 2 overheard suspicious phone calls later, Sophie knew she needed to tell her father. She'd carefully gathered what evidence she could: screenshots of the mystery man, notes about Victoria's contradicting stories, and a journal of odd behaviors she'd observed over the past weeks. Nathan had just returned from another business trip, looking tired but happy to be home. He was in his study reviewing contracts when Sophie knocked tentatively on the door. "Dad, can we talk? It's important." Nathan glanced up, his face softening into a smile. "Always, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" Sophie closed the door behind her and sat in the leather chair across from his desk. Her heart hammered in her chest as she took a deep breath. "It's about Victoria, Dad. I don't think she's who you think she is." Nathan's expression shifted subtly. "Sophie, please just listen," she pleaded. "She acts completely different when you're not around. She's mean and cold, and she keeps meeting with this man named Tyler. I saw them kissing, Dad." "Kissing?" Nathan set down his pen. "Sophie, that's a very serious accusation." "I have proof." Sophie pulled out her tablet, showing him the blurry photo she'd managed to capture. "That's Victoria's head, and that's the man. And look at these texts she sent when she accidentally left her phone in the kitchen." Nathan squinted at the screen. "Honey, this could be anyone. The photo is too blurry. And these texts just show Victoria discussing wedding plans with someone named T. That's probably her wedding planner." "But she—" "Sophie," Nathan interrupted gently, "I understand this is a big adjustment. Your mother's been gone for 2 years now, and it's natural to feel protective of her memory." Sophie felt tears of frustration burning behind her eyes. "This isn't about Mom. Victoria is hiding things from you. She's not who she pretends to be." The study door opened, and Victoria stood there in a casual but elegant outfit, her expression concerned. "Is everything all right? I thought I heard raised voices." "Everything's fine," Nathan said. "Sophie and I were just having a chat." Victoria's gaze moved between them, lingering on Sophie's tablet. "What lovely family bonding. Nathan, don't forget. We have dinner with the Michelsons at 7. I won't, he assured her. As Victoria turned to leave, Nathan called after her. Victoria, Sophie has some concerns she'd like to discuss. Maybe we could all sit down tonight after dinner. Victoria's smile remained fixed. Of course, darling. Whatever Sophie needs. After she left, Nathan turned back to Sophie. See? Victoria wants to make this work. Give her a chance, okay? We'll talk together tonight. Sophie nodded mutely, knowing the promised conversation would never happen. Victoria would find some way to avoid it, as she had with every other attempt Sophie had made to address her concerns. Later that afternoon, Sophie found herself alone, with Victoria in the garden. Victoria was inspecting the roses for the wedding ceremony when she spoke without turning around. You're playing a dangerous game, Sophie. Sophie froze. What do you mean? Victoria snipped a rose with precise movements. Children have such active imaginations, don't they? Stories about mysterious men and secret meetings. She turned, twirling the rose between her fingers. Nobody believes children who tell tales, Sophie. They get labeled as troubled or attention-seeking. Is that what you want? My dad trusts me, Sophie insisted, though her voice trembled. Victoria laughed softly. Your father trusts me more. After all, who would believe a jealous child over the woman who brought happiness back into his life? She approached, bending to Sophie's level. Stop digging, Sophie. It won't end well for you. As Victoria walked away, Sophie felt a chill despite the warm spring air. Victoria's threat had been crystal clear, and so was the realization that Sophie would need real, undeniable evidence if she had any hope of protecting her father. Sophie bolted upright in bed, her heart pounding. The nightmare had been the same one she'd had for weeks. Victoria standing over her sleeping father, a shadowy figure behind her. Glancing at her bedside clock, she saw it was just after midnight. Thirsty and shaken, Sophie slipped out of bed. The hallway was dark except for a thin line of light under her father's study door. Nathan had left for a business conference in Chicago earlier that day, which meant Victoria was still awake, and alone. Moving silently in her sock feet, Sophie approached the staircase. Voices drifted up from the kitchen below, Victoria's and Amanda's. Crouching in the shadows of the upper hallway, Sophie strained to listen. The wedding is in 3 weeks, Tyler, Victoria was saying, her voice lacking its usual honeyed tone. Once we're legally married, the plan moves forward. It's too risky, the man, Tyler, responded. The girl suspects something. She's watching. You. Sophie? Victoria laughed dismissively. She's a child. Nathan thinks she's just jealous and acting out. He doesn't take her seriously. What about the sister? Olivia? She was asking questions at the engagement party. Nothing she can prove. Besides, once the policy is signed tomorrow, everything is in place. Sophie inched closer to the banister, desperate to hear more clearly. $50 million is a lot of money, Vic, Tyler said. Worth being careful for. The policy gets filed tomorrow. 6 months after the wedding, we stage the accident. Clean, simple. The grieving widow inherits everything, and Nathan Bennett won't be our problem anymore. Sophie gasped involuntarily, her water glass slipping from her fingers and shattering on the hardwood floor. The conversation below ceased instantly. What was that? Tyler hissed. Upstairs, Victoria replied. Stay here. Sophie scrambled to her feet and raced back to her bedroom, diving under the covers just as Victoria's footsteps reached the top of the stairs. She forced her breathing to slow, pretending to be asleep as her door creaked open. Victoria stood, there for what seemed like eternity before speaking. Sophie, are you awake? Sophie kept her eyes closed, focusing on maintaining even breaths despite her racing heart. The bed dipped slightly as Victoria sat on the edge. I know you're awake, Sophie. Her voice was soft but held an edge of steel. What did you hear? Unable to maintain the pretense, Sophie opened her eyes. I just got up for some water. I dropped my glass. Victoria studied her face in the dim light, filtering through the curtains. And that's all? You went straight for water and came right back? Sophie nodded, fighting to keep her expression neutral. Victoria's fingers toyed with the edge of Sophie's blanket. You know, accidents happen all the time, Sophie, especially to curious little girls who don't mind their own business. I don't know what you're talking about, Sophie whispered. Good, let's keep it that way. Victoria stood smoothly. I'll have Rosa clean up the broken glass in the morning. Sleep tight, Sophie. At the doorway she paused. And Sophie? Sleepwalking can be so dangerous. Perhaps we should start locking your door at night. For your safety, of course. After Victoria left, Sophie lay rigid in bed, her mind racing. The conversation replayed in her head. Policy, accident, 50 million. They were planning to kill her father after the wedding. Sophie clutched her blanket tightly. She had no proof, no recordings, nothing but her word against Victoria's. No adult would believe her without evidence. Yet now she knew with certainty that her father's life depended on her finding that proof, and quickly. The wedding was only 3 weeks away. The morning after overhearing Victoria's late-night conversation, Sophie feigned illness to stay home from school. Her father was still away at his conference, and Victoria had a full day of wedding preparations, the perfect opportunity for Sophie to search for evidence. Are you sure you'll be all right alone? Victoria asked, her concern perfectly pitched, for Rosa, the housekeeper, who was preparing breakfast nearby. I can reschedule my appointments. I'll be fine, Sophie assured her. I just need rest. Victoria smiled thinly. Rosa will check on you periodically. I'll be back by 4. She leaned closer, whispering. Stay in bed, Sophie. Doctor's orders. The implicit threat hung in the air between them. As soon as Victoria's car disappeared down the driveway, Sophie jumped into action. She had approximately 6 hours before Victoria returned, minus the times Rosa would come to check on her. Sophie started in the guest room Victoria had claimed as her home office. The door was locked, but Sophie had discovered weeks ago that the old skeleton key from the library cabinet worked on most of the mansion's interior doors. Inside, Victoria's office was meticulously organized, too organized, as if intentionally sanitized of personal information. Sophie carefully searched through file folders and drawers, finding nothing suspicious until she noticed a small safe tucked inside the closet. Great, she muttered. I don't know the combination. As she turned to leave, Sophie spotted Victoria's tablet charging on the desk. Surprisingly, it wasn't password protected. Perhaps Victoria felt secure in the locked room, or perhaps she never expected an 8-year-old to snoop through her things. Sophie quickly began searching through emails and photos. Most were innocuous, wedding plans, work correspondences, interior design ideas, but a folder labeled Insurance caught her attention. Inside were scanned documents for a new life insurance policy on Nathan Bennett, $50 million, with Victoria Hayes listed as the sole beneficiary. The policy had indeed been signed, yesterday just as Sophie had overheard. Oh, Dad, Sophie whispered, her heart sinking. Footsteps in the hallway startled her. Sophie quickly took photos of the documents with her own tablet, then closed the apps and replaced Victoria's tablet exactly as she'd found it. She slipped behind the door just as Rosa knocked on her bedroom door down the hall. Miss Sophie? I brought you some soup. Coming, Sophie called, racing quietly back to her room through the connecting bathroom. After Rosa left, Sophie continued her investigation when the coast was clear. In the master bedroom, she carefully searched Victoria's belongings, finding a hidden compartment in her jewelry box containing a small flash drive and several photos of Victoria with Tyler, looking very much like a couple, in various locations, around the world. Most importantly, Sophie discovered a small notebook wedged behind the headboard, filled with dates, amounts, and names, including her father's with the notation 50 Emir and July accident, circled multiple times. Sophie's hands trembled as she documented everything with her tablet's camera. As she carefully replaced the notebook, she heard the unmistakable sound of the front door opening. Victoria was home early. Panic surged through Sophie as she heard footsteps on the stairs. She frantically restored everything to its exact position, then dashed toward her own room. As she rounded the corner of the hallway, she collided directly with Victoria. Sophie! Victoria's eyes narrowed dangerously. I thought you were resting in bed. I was just looking for more tissues, Sophie stammered, clutching her tablet protectively against her chest. Victoria's gaze dropped to the tablet. What's that you're holding so tightly? Just my games, Sophie lied. Playing helps me forget. I don't feel well. Victoria extended her hand. May I see? Perhaps I can recommend some better games. Sophie's mind raced. The evidence was right there on her tablet, unlocked and accessible. Actually, I'm feeling really tired now. I should lie down. Victoria's perfectly manicured fingers closed around Sophie's wrist. Insist. Just then, Rosa appeared at the bottom of the stairs. Miss Victoria, the florist is here with questions about the wedding arrangements. Victoria's grip loosened. We'll continue this conversation later, she murmured, before turning away with a practiced smile. Back in her room, Sophie locked the door and frantically transferred all the photos and evidence to her secret email account, then deleted them from her tablet. Heart pounding, she knew she needed help, and soon. With trembling fingers, she texted Aunt Olivia. I need to talk to you. It's about Dad. It's an emergency. Mrs. Reynolds noticed the change in Sophie immediately when she returned to school Next day. The normally engaged student sat listlessly at her desk, dark circles under her eyes jumping at small noises. After class, the teacher gently asked Sophie to stay behind. You haven't been yourself lately, she said, sitting beside Sophie rather than across from her. Is everything all right at home? Sophie stared at her hands. She'd been carrying the weight of her discoveries alone, terrified of Victoria's threats, yet equally terrified of what would happen if she did nothing. Her father remained oblivious, enchanted by Victoria's carefully constructed persona. Mrs. Reynolds? Sophie began hesitantly. How do you know if an adult is dangerous? The question hung in the air between them. Mrs. Reynolds studied Sophie's face, her expression softening with concern. Dangerous how, Sophie? What if they're pretending to be someone they're not? What if they want to hurt someone you love? But nobody believes you because you're just a kid. Sophie's voice cracked on the last word. Mrs. Reynolds leaned forward. Sophie, if you're afraid of someone or worried they might hurt you or someone else, that's something you should tell a trusted adult immediately. But what if there's no proof? What if it's just my word against theirs? Is this about your father's fiancé? Mrs. Reynolds asked gently. Sophie's head snapped up. How did you know? You've been different since your father announced his engagement, more withdrawn, anxious. Mrs. Reynolds placed a reassuring hand on Sophie's shoulder. Whatever's happening, you don't have to handle it alone. Tears welled in Sophie's eyes. Victoria isn't who everyone thinks she is. I overheard her planning something terrible with a man named Tyler, but Dad won't listen to me. He thinks I'm just jealous. Mrs. Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. Your Aunt Olivia picked you up from school last year after your father had that emergency appendectomy, right? Perhaps she could help? I texted her yesterday, but she hasn't answered yet. Let me make a suggestion, Mrs. Reynolds said. Write down everything you've observed, dates, times, exactly what you saw or heard. Be specific and stick to facts. This might help adults take your concerns more seriously. Sophie nodded, a small flicker of hope igniting within her. Thank you for believing me. That afternoon, Sophie waited nervously on the mansion's front steps. Aunt Olivia had finally responded to her text, agreeing to pick her up from school. But Victoria had unexpectedly changed plans and sent Rosa instead. Sophie had pretended to forget a book and doubled back to school, texting Olivia the new meeting location, the small park 2 blocks from her house. When Olivia's silver sedan pulled up, Sophie practically ran to the car. This is all very cloak and dagger, Olivia remarked, though her smile faded when she saw Sophie's expression. What's going on, sweetheart? Victoria is planning to kill Dad after the wedding, Sophie blurted out. For his life insurance money. Olivia's eyebrows shot up. That's quite an accusation, Sophie. I know how it sounds, Sophie said desperately. But I have proof. She pulled out her tablet, showing Olivia the photos she'd taken of Victoria's hidden notebook, the insurance policy, and the pictures of Victoria with Tyler. Olivia scrolled through the evidence, her expression growing increasingly troubled. Have you shown this to your father? He won't listen. Victoria has him completely fooled. Sophie's voice shook. The wedding is in less than 3 weeks and they're planning an accident 6 months after that. Olivia was silent for a long moment, processing everything Sophie had shown her. Finally, she squeezed Sophie's hand. I've had my doubts about Victoria from the beginning. Something about her story never quite added up. You believe me? Sophie asked, tears of relief filling her eyes. I believe that you found something concerning, Olivia said carefully. But we need more than photos of a notebook and some circumstantial evidence to stop this wedding. What can we do? Olivia started the car, checking her watch. First, I need to get you home before Victoria realizes you're missing. Then, I'm going to hire someone to look into Victoria's background, a professional investigator who can find information we can't. As they approached the mansion, Olivia parked a block away. This stays between us for now, okay? Act normal around Victoria. Don't let her know we suspect anything. Sophie nodded solemnly. What if we can't find enough? Proof before the wedding? Olivia's expression hardened with determination. Then we'll have to stop it another way, I promise you, Sophie. I won't let anything happen to your father. For the first time in weeks, Sophie felt the crushing weight on her shoulders lighten slightly. She wasn't alone anymore. The grandfather clock in the foyer chimed 7 times as Sophie sat on her window seat, watching guests arrive for the rehearsal dinner. Tomorrow, her father would marry Victoria unless a miracle occurred. The past 2 weeks had been a blur of wedding preparations and mounting anxiety. Sophie had maintained her act of gradual acceptance around Victoria, who remained suspicious, but increasingly preoccupied with last-minute details. Meanwhile, Aunt Olivia's investigator had been digging into Victoria's past, communicating findings through coded text messages that appeared to be about Olivia's graphic design business. Sophie's phone buzzed with a message from Olivia. Project deadline moved up. Meeting client tonight. Breakthrough imminent. Her heart raced. The investigator had found something. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Sophie, are you ready, sweetheart? Her father stood in the doorway, handsome in his tuxedo, his expression radiating happiness, almost dad. She forced a smile, straightening the junior bridesmaid dress she'd reluctantly agreed to wear. Nathan sat beside her on the window seat. I know these past few months haven't been easy for you. He took her hand. But I'm proud of how you're trying with Victoria. Tomorrow's going to be the start of something wonderful for our family. Sophie swallowed hard. Dad, if something doesn't feel right, you can always change your mind even at the last minute. Nathan chuckled. Wedding jitters are contagious, I see. He kissed her forehead. Everything is perfect, Sophie. Finally perfect again. Downstairs, the rehearsal dinner sparkled with champagne and laughter. Victoria worked the room like a seasoned politician, her white cocktail dress a preview of tomorrow's bridal elegance. Several times, Sophie caught Victoria watching her with calculated eyes, as if measuring the threat she still posed. Sophie picked at her food, constantly checking her phone for updates from Olivia, who was conspicuously absent from the dinner. Is everything all right? Mrs. Reynolds, who had been invited as a family friend, asked quietly. Just nervous about tomorrow, Sophie replied, the half-truth sticking in her throat. As dessert was being served, Sophie's phone finally buzzed again. Outside in the garden, now, come alone. Mumbling an excuse about needing air, Sophie slipped through the French doors onto the terrace and hurried down the stone steps to the rose garden, her mother's pride and joy, now meticulously incorporated into Victoria's wedding decor. Olivia stood in the shadows of the gazebo, accompanied by a serious-looking man with silver hair. Sophie, this is Mr. Callahan, the investigator I hired. Mr. Callahan nodded solemnly. Your suspicions were correct, young lady. Victoria Hayes isn't who she claims to be. He opened a file. Her real name is Vanessa Hill. She's been involved in at least 3 cases where wealthy men died under suspicious circumstances shortly after marrying her. She disappears afterward, assuming new identities. He showed Sophie photographs of Victoria with different hair colors. sometimes wearing glasses or colored contacts, but unmistakably the same woman. The man you know as Tyler is Brandon Cooper, her longtime accomplice and real romantic partner. They've worked this scheme before. She marries the mark, sets up insurance policies, stages an accident, collects, and they move on to the next target. "We need to tell Dad right now," Sophie exclaimed. "We've been trying," Olivia explained. "I've called him repeatedly, but his phone goes straight to voicemail. We need to find him immediately." They hurried back toward the house but froze when they saw Victoria standing on the terrace, illuminated by the soft garden lights. Her expression was cold as she watched them approach. "What a cozy little garden meeting," Victoria said, her voice dangerously calm. "Olivia, I don't recall seeing your name on tonight's guest list. Where's my brother?" Olivia demanded. Victoria smiled thinly. "Nathan stepped out to pick up a surprise gift for me. So touching, his thoughtfulness." She glanced at Mr. Callahan. "And who might this be? Another uninvited guest?" "We know who you really are, Vanessa," Olivia stated firmly. Something flickered in Victoria's eyes, surprise quickly masked by calculation. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sophie, darling, it's getting late. You should be in bed. Tomorrow's a big day." Mr. Callahan stepped forward. "Ms. Hill, I've already contacted the FBI about your past activities in Florida and Arizona. They're very interested in speaking with you." Victoria's composure wavered for just a moment before she laughed lightly. "This is absurd. I'm going inside to call security." She turned sharply, her white dress catching the breeze as she ascended the steps. "She's warning Tyler," Sophie realized aloud. "And Dad's not here to protect us." Olivia squeezed Sophie's shoulder reassuringly. "We have enough evidence now. She can't escape this time." As they watched Victoria disappear into the house, Sophie felt a strange mixture of vindication and terror. They'd uncovered the truth, but with the wedding just hours away and her father nowhere to be found, would it be enough to stop Victoria's deadly plan? St. Paul's Cathedral gleamed in the morning sunlight, its stone facade adorned with cascading white roses and silk ribbons. Inside, Boston's elite filled the pews, murmuring appreciatively at the lavish decorations. A string quartet played softly as ushers guided late arrivals to their seats. Sophie stood in a side chamber, her junior bridesmaid dress feeling like a costume in some terrible play. The night before had ended in frustrating stalemate. After their confrontation in the garden, Victoria had disappeared into the crowd of guests, and neither Olivia nor Sophie had managed to speak privately with Nathan. He'd returned home late, buzzing with pre-wedding excitement, and immediately sequestered himself in the guest house as tradition dictated. This morning, all Sophie's attempts to reach her father had been blocked by Victoria's efficient wedding planner and bridesmaids, who insisted the bride and groom not see each other before the ceremony. "You look beautiful, Sophie," Mrs. Reynolds said, adjusting Sophie's flower crown. The teacher had arrived early, sensing Sophie might need support. "Have you seen Aunt Olivia?" Sophie whispered urgently. Mrs. Reynolds nodded slightly. "She's in the vestibule with a police detective. They're waiting for your father to arrive." Hope surged through Sophie. "So they believe us?" "The detective wants more evidence before interrupting the ceremony, but he's here." "That's something." The chamber door opened and Victoria swept in, resplendent in a designer gown that transformed her into a vision of bridal perfection. 4 bridesmaids fluttered around her, adjusting her veil and train. "Everyone out," Victoria commanded with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I need a moment with my soon-to-be stepdaughter." When they were alone, Victoria approached Sophie, lowering her voice. "I know what you and your aunt are planning. It won't work." "We know the truth about you and Tyler," Sophie replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Victoria's smile tightened. "Your father won't believe you without proof, which you don't have. Any evidence you've gathered mysteriously disappeared from your tablet last night while you slept." Sophie's heart sank. She should have anticipated this. "Even if you convince a few people to doubt me," Victoria continued, "creating a scene will only humiliate your father publicly." "Is that what you want? To embarrass him in front of everyone who matters in his world?" Before Sophie could respond, the wedding planner burst in. 5 minutes, everyone. Bridesmaids, take your positions. In the cathedral's main hall, Sophie's eyes desperately scanned the crowd as she processed down the aisle. She spotted Aunt Olivia in the back row beside a stern-looking man in a dark suit, the detective, presumably. Olivia gave an almost imperceptible nod. The plan was still on. Sophie took her place near the altar, watching as her father stood beaming, handsome in his tuxedo, utterly unaware of the danger behind Victoria's radiant smile as she glided down the aisle on the arm of her uncle, whom Sophie now suspected was another accomplice. The ceremony proceeded like a beautiful nightmare. The priest spoke of love and devotion, while Sophie's mind screamed silent warnings. When he reached the critical moment, "If anyone knows why this couple should not be joined in matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace," Sophie felt time slow down. This was the moment. The detective hadn't moved. Aunt Olivia seemed frozen, in indecision. It had to be her. Sophie stepped forward, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear her own voice. "Stop! You can't marry her, Dad." A collective gasp rippled through the cathedral. Nathan turned to Sophie, his expression shocked and embarrassed. "Sophie, what are you doing?" "She's not who you think she is." Sophie's voice grew stronger. "Her real name is Vanessa Hill. She and her boyfriend Tyler are planning to kill you for your life insurance money." The cathedral erupted in scandalized whispers. Victoria's face contorted momentarily before she composed herself, reaching for Nathan's. "How is she, darling? She's clearly upset. Children often act out when—" "It's true," Sophie continued desperately. "Aunt Olivia hired an investigator. Victoria has done this before to other men. Please, Dad, you have to believe me." All eyes turned to Olivia, who stood and stepped into the aisle. "Nathan, we need to talk, now, before you do something you can't undo." Nathan looked between his daughter, his sister, and his bride, confusion and anger warring on his face. The perfect day was unraveling before his eyes. "This is ridiculous," Victoria protested, her voice breaking strategically. "Nathan, please, don't let them ruin our wedding day with these horrible accusations." As the murmurs in the cathedral grew louder, Sophie played her final card. "Check my teddy bear, Dad. The one Mom gave me. I hid copies of all the evidence inside it. Please." The cathedral had transformed from a place of serenity to a scene of utter chaos. Guests stood from their pews, necks craning to witness the unfolding drama at the altar. Nathan's face had drained of color as he looked between his daughter and his bride. "Nathan," Victoria pleaded, gripping his arm. "These are absurd accusations from a jealous child who can't accept our happiness. Please don't let them ruin our special day." The detective Olivia had brought moved forward, badge in hand. "Mr. Bennett, I'm Detective Pearson with Boston PD. We have reason to believe your fiancée isn't who she claims to be." Nathan's bewilderment turned to anger. "You brought the police to my wedding?" he demanded of Olivia. "Dad, please," Sophie begged. "Just check my teddy bear. Everything is there. The insurance policy, pictures of Victoria with Tyler, her notebook with plans for your accident." Victoria's composure momentarily slipped, her eyes darting to the cathedral's side exit where Tyler stood watching tensely. Dressed as a wedding photographer, she quickly recovered, producing tears that drew sympathetic murmurs from several guests. "I can't believe you would humiliate me like this," she said to Nathan. "This is just a misunderstanding. Your sister has always disliked me, and she's using Sophie to—" "The bear, Dad," Sophie insisted. "Mom's bear that she gave me before she died. Just look inside it." Something in Sophie's desperate plea seemed to finally reach Nathan. He turned to the wedding planner. "Get Sophie's teddy bear from the bridal suite. Now." Victoria's carefully constructed facade began to crack. "This is ridiculous. We're keeping everyone waiting for a child's toy?" "It will only take a moment," Nathan said firmly, his own doubts finally surfacing. "If there's nothing to these accusations, we'll continue." Immediately, the excruciating minutes that followed were punctuated by uncomfortable coughs and whispered conversations among the guests. When the wedding planner returned with the worn teddy bear, Nathan took it gently from her hands. "There's a small opening. In the back," Sophie directed, her voice trembling. Nathan found the hidden zipper and carefully extracted a sealed envelope. As he opened it and examined the contents, photos, insurance documents, and notes written in Victoria's distinctive handwriting, his face transformed through disbelief, confusion, and finally, devastating realization. "Victoria," he whispered, looking up with haunted eyes. "What is this?" Victoria recognized the moment her scheme collapsed. Her tearful bride persona vanished, replaced by cold calculation. In one swift move, she snatched the envelope from Nathan's hands and backed away. From the altar. "You stupid child," she hissed at Sophie. "You couldn't just mind your own business, could you?" Detective Pearson moved forward. "Vanessa Hill, you're under arrest for fraud and conspiracy." Victoria's eyes darted around the cathedral like a cornered animal. In the ensuing confusion, she suddenly bolted toward the side exit where Tyler waited. Several guests tried to block her path, but she pushed through, her wedding dress billowing behind her. "Stop them," Detective Pearson shouted, racing down the aisle. Nathan stood frozen for a moment before his paternal instincts overtook his shock. He pulled Sophie protectively behind him as the chaos unfolded. Outside, the screech of tires signaled Victoria, and Tyler's escape in a waiting car. The perfect white wedding had dissolved into a crime scene, with stunned guests spilling onto the cathedral steps as police radios crackled with descriptions of the fleeing suspects. The Bennett mansion felt cavernous and silent after the chaos of the aborted wedding. Yellow police tape cordoned off Victoria's former office, where forensic technicians carefully cataloged evidence. In the living room, Nathan sat motionless on the sofa, still in his wedding tuxedo minus the jacket and tie, staring at nothing in particular. Sophie watched her father from the doorway, uncertain how to approach him. The drive home from the cathedral had been silent, the magnitude of the day's events too overwhelming for words. Detective Pearson had offered to send an officer to stay with them overnight, but Nathan had declined, insisting they needed family time alone. Aunt Olivia emerged from the kitchen with 3 mugs of hot chocolate on a tray. "Some comfort food," she announced, setting it down on the coffee table. She nodded encouragingly at Sophie. Taking a deep breath, Sophie crossed the room and sat beside her father. "Dad, are you okay?" Nathan turned to her, his eyes refocusing, as if emerging from a trance. "Sophie." He pulled her into a tight embrace, his voice breaking. "My brave, brilliant girl. You saved my life." Tears that Sophie had been holding back for hours finally spilled over. "I tried to tell you. I tried so many times." "I know, sweetheart. I know." Nathan stroked her hair, his own eyes glistening. "I was so blind, so completely fooled. If you hadn't been so persistent." Olivia joined them, placing a comforting hand on her brother's shoulder. "The police have issued an APB for Victoria, or Vanessa, and Tyler. Detective Pearson thinks they may try to leave the country." "How could I not have seen it?" Nathan asked, the question directed at himself more than anyone else. Looking back now, there were so many signs, so many inconsistencies in her stories. "Con artists like Vanessa are professionals," Olivia reminded him gently. "They know exactly how to manipulate people's emotions and desires." The doorbell rang, causing all 3 to tense. Olivia went to answer it, returning moments later with Detective Pearson. "Sorry to intrude," he said, declining Olivia's offer of hot chocolate. "We've made some progress I thought you should know about. We found their escape vehicle abandoned at Logan Airport, but no sign of Hill or Cooper on any outbound flights." "So they're still in Boston?" Nathan asked, his arm protectively around Sophie. "Possibly. We've frozen all accounts connected to Vanessa Hill and her known aliases, as well as Tyler Cooper's. Airport security and Border Patrol have their photos." He hesitated before continuing. "Mr. Bennett, we found something concerning in their vehicle. Detailed floor plans of your house, including notes about security systems and your daily routines." Sophie felt her father stiffen beside her. "You think they might come here?" Nathan stated rather than asked. Detective Pearson nodded, grimly. "It's a possibility we can't ignore. These people have built their lives around this scheme and now they've lost everything." That makes them desperate and unpredictable. What should we do? Olivia asked. I'd recommend staying elsewhere for a few days. Somewhere they wouldn't think to look. We'll maintain surveillance on the property. Nathan shook his head firmly. This is our home. I won't let them drive us out of it. He glanced at Sophie, his resolve softening. But I need to keep my daughter safe. Perhaps she could stay with you, Olivia. Before Olivia could respond, Sophie spoke up. I'm not leaving you alone, Dad. We stick together. Detective Pearson cleared his throat. In that case, I'm stationing officers outside your property, Mr. Bennett. I'd also suggest activating your security system and limiting your movements for the next few days. After the detective left, the reality of their situation settled over the family like a heavy blanket. The immediate danger had passed, but Victoria, Vanessa, was still out there, possibly plotting revenge. That night, Nathan insisted Sophie sleep in his room. As they lay in the darkness, Sophie finally asked the question that had been haunting her. Dad? Are you sad about Victoria? I mean, you loved her. There was a long pause before Nathan answered. I'm sad about who I thought she was. That person never existed. He reached for Sophie's hand in the darkness. The person I'm grateful for is you. You saw the truth when I couldn't. You fought for us when no one would listen. I was so scared. You wouldn't believe me, Sophie whispered. I will always believe you, Sophie. Always. That's my promise to you, today and forever. Outside, rain began to fall, washing away the last remnants of what should have been a wedding day. Inside, father and daughter finally slept, united against whatever might come next. 3 weeks after the wedding turned disaster, a new normal had gradually established itself in the Bennett household. The police surveillance had been reduced to occasional drive-bys, and the shock of Victoria's deception had settled into a dull ache rather than an acute pain. Nathan had thrown himself back into work, while Sophie found comfort in returning to school and her old routines. On this particular evening, Nathan and Sophie sat at the kitchen island, sharing pizza and reviewing Sophie's science project, a welcome slice of ordinary life. The police called today, Nathan mentioned, trying to sound casual. They've tracked Victoria and Tyler to Montreal. Apparently, they had fake Canadian IDs prepared as a contingency. Sophie set down her slice. Appetite suddenly diminished. Are they going to catch them? Canadian authorities are working with the FBI. Detective Pearson thinks it's just a matter of time. Nathan squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. We're safe, sweetheart. They're running for their lives now, not plotting against us. The doorbell rang, making them both jump despite themselves. Old anxieties died hard. I'll get it, Nathan said, checking the security camera feed on his phone before relaxing. It's just Mrs. Reynolds. Sophie's teacher had become a regular visitor. Since the incident, her kindness providing a stabilizing presence for both Bennett survivors. Tonight she carried a folder of articles about resilience in children, which she and Nathan discussed while Sophie finished her homework upstairs. Later, after Mrs. Reynolds had left and Sophie was getting ready for bed, her tablet chimed with a video call request from Aunt Olivia. Hey, superstar, Olivia greeted her. How's my favorite niece? Better, Sophie answered honestly. Dad doesn't look so sad anymore when he thinks I'm not watching. Olivia nodded approvingly. Your father's always been resilient. It runs in the family, evidently. Her expression grew more serious. Listen, Sophie, I'm calling because I've just heard from my investigator friend. Tyler Cooper was apprehended trying to cross the border into the United States near Vermont. He was alone. Sophie's heart raced. What about Victoria? Still at large. But here's the important part. Tyler's cooperating with authorities. He's revealed details about their previous cons, including... Olivia hesitated, choosing her words carefully, including the fact that Victoria tends to seek revenge when she feels wronged. She wants to hurt us, Sophie stated flatly, voicing what they'd all feared. The police don't think she'll risk coming back to Boston, but I wanted you both to remain vigilant. Is your father there? He's downstairs locking up. I'll tell him about Tyler. After ending the call, Sophie hugged her knees to her chest, the familiar fear creeping back. She'd been trying so hard to put Victoria out of her mind, to stop jumping at shadows and checking locks multiple times. Now it felt like they'd stepped back to those first anxious days after the wedding. Downstairs, she found Nathan in his study, reviewing contracts. His expression darkened as she relayed Olivia's news. "I'm calling Detective Pearson," he decided, reaching for his phone. "We should increase security again, just to be safe." That night, Sophie struggled to sleep despite the renewed police patrol outside and her father's reassurances. Around 2 a.m., a noise from downstairs jolted her fully awake, the faint but unmistakable sound of breaking glass. Heart pounding, Sophie slipped out of bed and crept to her bedroom door. The security system should have triggered with a broken window, but the house remained silent. Either it was her imagination or another noise, a soft footfall on the staircase. Sophie backed away from the door, frantically searching for her phone. It wasn't on her nightstand where she usually kept it. Panic rose in her throat as she remembered she'd left it charging in the kitchen after dinner. The footsteps were closer now, moving with deliberate slowness down the hallway toward her father's room. Sophie made a split-second decision and quietly opened her bedroom window. The security system's control panel was on the first floor. If someone had disabled it, her only chance was to climb down the oak tree outside her window and run to the neighbor's house for help. As she straddled the windowsill, a flash of movement in the garden below froze her in place. A figure stood watching the house, face obscured in shadow but posture unmistakably alert. A lookout. There were at least 2 intruders. They were trapped. Silently closing the window, Sophie slid under her bed instead, praying her father would wake up before Victoria reached his room. From beneath her bed, Sophie could see only a sliver of her bedroom door and the hallway beyond. The house had fallen silent again, but she knew that silence was deceptive. Victoria was inside, moving with the stealth of a predator. Sophie's mind raced. Her father's room was at the end of the hall. If Victoria reached him before he woke up, she couldn't bear to complete the thought. Sliding her hand along the carpet, she found the metal baseball bat she'd kept under her bed since Victoria's escape. The weight of it provided little comfort against the terror gripping her chest, but it was better than nothing. The floorboard outside her room creaked. Sophie held her breath as her bedroom door slowly opened, revealing a pair of black boots. Not Victoria's. The accomplice, then. The lookout she'd spotted in the garden must have entered the house as well. The boots moved around her room, checking the closet first, then approaching the bed. Sophie gripped the bat tighter, preparing for discovery. Suddenly, the bedroom light flicked on and a male voice hissed, "She's not here, check the bathroom." A second set of footsteps entered, lighter, familiar. Victoria. The brat must be in Nathan's room. Victoria whispered, "You check the bathroom and guest room, I'll handle them both." As the boots moved away, Sophie made a split-second decision. She couldn't wait hidden any longer. She had to warn her father. The moment Victoria left her doorway, Sophie scooted from beneath the bed and darted into the hallway in the opposite direction. She ran full speed toward her father's room, clutching the bat. "Dad, wake up!" she screamed. "Victoria's here!" Behind her, Victoria snarled, "You little—" But Sophie didn't look back, focusing only on reaching her father's door. She burst into Nathan's bedroom just as he bolted upright in bed. "Sophie, she's here! Victoria!" Sophie slammed. The door shut behind her and turned the lock just as something heavy thudded against it from the other side. Nathan was instantly alert, reaching for his phone on the nightstand. "I'm calling 911. The security system didn't go off," Sophie explained breathlessly. "There are 2 of them. One's a man I don't recognize." The door shuddered under another impact. "Nathan!" Victoria's voice was eerily calm despite the situation. "Open the door. Let's talk this through like adults." Nathan pushed Sophie behind him as he backed them toward the ensuite bathroom. "The police are on their way, Vanessa," he called out, his voice steady despite the fear evident in his eyes. You still have a chance to leave before they arrive. A cold laugh came from the hallway. Always so reasonable, Nathan. That's what made you such an easy mark. The door frame splintered. Under another blow, they were trying to break it down. Nathan grabbed a heavy crystal award from his dresser for protection, then quickly locked the bathroom door behind them after they retreated inside. The window, he whispered to Sophie. We can climb down the trellis. As Nathan struggled to open the painted shut window, the bathroom door handle jiggled. I just wanted your money, Nathan, Victoria called through the door. Now I want satisfaction. Do you know what your precious daughter cost me? Years of planning, my reputation, everything. The bathroom door wasn't as solid as the bedroom door. It wouldn't hold for long. Finally, the window budged. Nathan pushed it open and looked down at the 15-foot drop to the garden below. Though, trellis looked fragile, but it was their only option. I'll go first, he told Sophie. If it holds me, it'll definitely hold you. Just as Nathan swung his leg over the windowsill, the bathroom door burst open. Victoria stood there, her beauty transformed by hatred into something terrifying. Behind her loomed a burly man with a crowbar. Going somewhere? Victoria asked, a pistol now visible in her hand. Nathan pushed Sophie behind him protectively. This is between us, Vanessa. Let Sophie go. Victoria's laugh was brittle. Sophie is the reason we're here. If not for her meddling, I'd be Mrs. Bennet now, planning your tragic accident. She raised the gun. Now we'll have to improvise. The distant wail of police sirens pierced the night. Victoria's accomplice shifted nervously. Cops are coming. We need to go. Not yet, Victoria snapped, her eyes never leaving Nathan and Sophie. I didn't come this far to leave empty-handed. The man grabbed Victoria's arm. This wasn't the plan. I'm not going down for murder. In that moment of distraction, Nathan lunged forward with the crystal award, knocking the gun from Victoria's hand. It skittered across the tiled floor as chaos erupted in the small bathroom. Victoria's accomplice shoved Nathan against the wall, while Victoria scrambled for the weapon. Sophie, seeing her chance, swung her baseball bat with all her strength, connecting with Victoria's outstretched arm. Victoria screamed in pain and fury as Nathan grappled with her accomplice. The sirens grew louder. Help was close, but not close enough. As Victoria recovered and lunged toward Sophie, Nathan broke free from the other man and threw himself between them. You won't touch my daughter. The next few seconds unfolded in slow motion. Victoria, thwarted from reaching Sophie, redirected her rage at Nathan. In the ensuing struggle, they crashed against the bathroom vanity, sending glass and porcelain shattering across the floor. Blue lights flashed through the window as police cars screeched to a halt outside the mansion. The accomplice, seeing his chance, bolted from the room. Victoria, realizing she was cornered, made one last desperate attempt to reach the fallen gun. Sophie saw it first and kicked it under the clawfoot bathtub, beyond anyone's reach. It's over, Victoria, Nathan said, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead, but his voice firm. It's over. Heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs as officers stormed the house, Detective Pearson leading the charge. Police, hands where we can see them. Victoria's face contorted into a mask of pure hatred as she was handcuffed and led away. This isn't over, she hissed at Sophie. I'll never forget what you did to me. Neither will I, Sophie replied, standing tall beside her father as they watched Victoria taken away in defeat. 1 year later, the Bennet mansion was transformed. Gone were the heavy drapes and formal furniture Victoria had selected, replaced with warm colors, comfortable seating, and most importantly, laughter. Photos of Sophie's mother once again adorned the walls, joined by new pictures of Sophie and Nathan's adventures over the past year. Today was special, exactly 1 year since the night of Victoria's arrest. Nathan had declared it their second chance day and planned a surprise picnic in the garden where Sophie's mother had once tended roses. Dad, is the blindfold really necessary? Sophie giggled as Nathan guided her through the French doors onto the terrace. Absolutely essential, he assured her, carefully leading her down the stone steps. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. He removed the blindfold, revealing the garden transformed. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees despite the afternoon sun. A picnic, blanket spread beneath the old oak tree, held a feast of Sophie's favorite foods. But most surprising was the gathering of people. Aunt Olivia, Mrs. Reynolds, Detective Pearson, now retired, and even Mr. Callahan, the investigator who had helped uncover Victoria's true identity. "Surprise!" they called in unison. "What is all this?" Sophie asked, amazed at the effort her father had put into the celebration. Nathan knelt to her eye level, his expression serious despite the festive surroundings. "This is to honor the bravest person I know. You, Sophie Bennett." Aunt Olivia stepped forward, handing Sophie a small wrapped package. "We all wanted to celebrate the young woman who taught us about courage and persistence." Sophie unwrapped the gift, a delicate silver compass on a chain. Inside the lid, an inscription read, "Trust your direction. Love, Dad." "So you'll always find your way," Nathan explained. "And remember to trust your instincts. They've proven to be pretty remarkable." As the afternoon unfolded with food and stories, Sophie noticed how much her father had changed over the past year. The haunted look that had lingered in his eyes for months after Victoria's betrayal had finally disappeared. He laughed more easily, now, and the bond between them had strengthened into something unshakable. After the cake was served, Detective Pearson pulled them aside with an update they'd been waiting for. "The sentencing came through yesterday. Victoria, or Vanessa, got 20 years. Tyler cooperated fully and received 12. They won't trouble you again." Relief washed over Nathan's face as he squeezed Sophie's shoulder. "It's really over then." "Has been for some time," Pearson said with a knowing smile, glancing between Nathan and Mrs. Reynolds, who had been spending considerable time together in recent months. As dusk approached and guests began to depart, Sophie and her father sat alone, beneath the oak tree, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Are you happy, Dad?" Sophie asked, leaning against his shoulder. Nathan considered the question thoughtfully. "I am," he finally answered, surprising himself with the realization. "Not in the same way as before we lost your mother, but in a new way that feels authentic. Because there aren't any secrets between us anymore," Sophie suggested. "Exactly." Nathan wrapped an arm around her. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened with Victoria, how I was so desperate to recreate what I'd lost that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. What was that? That we were already a family, you and me, complete and whole, even in our grief." He looked down at his daughter, now 9 years old and somehow both the same child and completely changed by their ordeal. "You saved us both, Sophie. Not just from Victoria, but from living in the shadow of what we'd lost instead of building something new." Sophie fingered the compass, necklace, thinking about all they'd endured. "We saved each other." As darkness fell and the fairy lights twinkled more brightly, Nathan shared his other surprise, the Bennett Foundation, a new organization he'd created to help protect vulnerable people from cons and scams. Sophie would have a special role as junior advisor, sharing her perspective on how to recognize warning signs that adults might miss. "From something terrible, we're creating something good," Nathan explained. Sophie nodded, understanding that this was how healing worked, not by forgetting the darkness but by transforming it into light. Later that night, as Nathan tucked Sophie into bed, she asked the question that had lingered in her mind throughout the celebration. "Do you think Mom would be proud of us?" Nathan's eyes glistened in the soft lamplight. "Without a doubt. She always said you had her intuition and my determination. Turns out that's a pretty unbeatable combination." Sophie smiled sleepily, feeling truly safe for the first time in more than a year. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, my brave girl," Nathan replied, kissing her forehead. More than all the stars in the sky. As he turned to leave, Sophie called after him, "Dad, I'm glad we're still us." Nathan paused in the doorway, his heart full. "Me too, Sophie. That's the best part of this new beginning. We found our way back to ourselves." The Bennett mansion settled into peaceful quiet as father and daughter slept. Their bond, tested by fire and deception, now stronger than any force that might ever try to break it. The end.